This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 288, the November 28th, 2017 edition. Peter Thomas Fornatal back with you from the Brooklyn Bunker today, joined by telephone from the planet Texas by my usual co-host on this program. He is, of course, the People's Champ, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
We did break a little slow, broke inside towards the gap like you mentioned. Luckily enough, we did not drop the jockey like Dre Fong did. We're still intact, and we got a chance to go win this thing.
Let's hope. It's a tricky time of year. I envy my friends, my Irish buddies who do the Final Furlong podcast. You know, they get they get to the end of the flat season, and then all the excitement of the jump season and this whole other, in some quarters, especially in Ireland, more popular sport even with national hunt racing. We sort of go in a little bit of wind down mode here, though we do have some great racing still to come this year, and we'll be looking forward to talking about it all on the show. But it does make me think, JK, that we can have one of our little production meetings in the middle of the show here and talk about maybe some ways that listeners can help us participate in programming the show over the next few weeks until we get into the real serious run up to the Kentucky Derby and the Pegasus and all that big stuff that's going to be happening early next year. One show idea I had was to do another show with Mike Maloney where it's all listener questions. What do you think about that idea for a show in the coming weeks?
That would be awesome. I've been lucky enough to bombard Mike's office and ask him a bunch of questions. It's a ton of fun. So it'd be awesome for our listeners to be able to do it. It's funny. Any of these like weird thoughts that you have thought about in your handicapping mind about, well, I wonder if this is actually that. And you talk to him about it, and Mike's thought about it. And he's thought about it through and through, and he actually probably has some proof for you. So, being able to ask those questions is definitely worth something.
Preference will be given to questions from those who've actually bought the book, but all questions will be considered. Speaking of Maloney books, we have this ongoing contest, which I think we should put a stop date to, and it should be sometime in the next week or two, and it is to give away a book to one of the loyal listeners who goes ahead and leaves a review for the DRF Players Podcast on iTunes. Have you checked? Have we gotten any so far, JK?
No, I'm actually looking now. I'm just out of curiosity, so I'll see if there's anything that's shown up yet.
It's a super easy process, though. Folks can get involved just by putting up a review. You'll be in contention to win a free. Hey, let's make it signed. Free signed copy of Betting with an Edge by Mike Maloney. They've been flying off the shelves from what I've been hearing and from folks who've contacted me looking to purchase signed copies, which of course you can do via Twitter @LoomsBoldly, or you can just send an email to the podcast address, podcast@drf.com. But hey, why pay when you can get one for free? Leaving the review on iTunes is easy. You can either go through the main iTunes interface on your computer, or you can do it through the sort of native podcast app on your iPhone if you're an iPhone person. Go ahead and do that, and then I say we'll keep it going until the next books signed from Mike arrive at my doorstep, which should be sometime in the next 2 weeks. Then we will declare a winner and send out the book. And around that time, also, we'll have Mike on to talk about all the goings-on in racing. Had the pleasure of being on Night School with Jeremy Plonk and Steve Bick. I think it was Wednesday night right before Thanksgiving. You can access that through podcast form, through the Horse Player Now section, and you can hear me talking about the book and also like a nice hour with Mike talking about not just the book, but also a lot of the current issues in racing, especially pricing stuff that they go pretty deep, and you always learn something when you hear that guy talk.
There is some good stuff on here, PTF. People do, they don't hate us.
Hey, you're nobody till somebody loathes you. I always say that, JK. I'll be disappointed.
I'm trying to find a 1-star review so I can share it. But I don't see any
Kinchin, Fornatal won't shut up. Kinchin can't pick his nose. This is the stuff I'm looking for. I doubt we'll give them a really clever review trolling us in the text will be considered for the free book. But you have to still give us 5 stars because we can't reward a 1-star review. But check it out and get involved and have a chance to win the book. So JK, you did sort of one of your patented completely crazy trips to participate in a handicapping contest this weekend. Did you not? How did that go?
I was trying to help you write a good story, but unfortunately I couldn't get it done. I did. I was in Dallas for Thanksgiving, and then I drove back Friday morning. Drove back into town Friday morning, hung out with the Prince of Keeneland, who was in town in Austin.
Nice.
Hung out with the Prince of Keeneland here on Friday, and then Saturday morning I went to fly to Chicago at 8 a.m. My flight was delayed till 9 a.m. I was going to bet the early pick 5 in the early pick 4 in the Hawthorne tournament at Churchill Downs. I couldn't do that because my flight was delayed. I finally got there after a 40-minute Uber ride. I landed at 12. I Ubered over to Hawthorne. I went in. I ordered a Corona. I bet the late pick 5, and then I Ubered back to the airport, flew home, and just in time to hit the first 3 legs of the pick 5 with a $23 horse, $13 horse, $13 horse. And then I was singled to a horse that was in a stretch duel when my video crapped out on my phone.
Leave the story there. Leave the story there, and we'll get to it when we're going to recap those races. So I think that's a good setup, if you don't mind putting a pin in it, and we'll come right back to that story. I do also want to give some historical context here. There is precedence for this. Show up at Hawthorne for 5 minutes, play the pick 5, and have a successful article for me based on what you did. Gosh, I think it was at this point back in 2015, JK, at the Hawthorne tournament that took place on Arlington Million Day. Recap that story quick for people who don't know it.
Yeah, I was on the tour. I got done spending an entire week in Saratoga, played in the Saratoga tournament. I was obviously trying to win the tour. I needed a live score at that point. I jumped on a plane Arlington Million morning from Saratoga, from Albany, flew into Chicago. Our buddy and podcast listener, Eric Bialik, picked me up from the airport. We ran over to the Hawthorne OTB. I think we also grabbed a drink there. We made a pick. Made a pick 5 wager, and then head over to Arlington Park, watch the pick 5, hit the pick 5 for, I think, $20,000, won the entire tournament. That win is probably the win that helped me win the tour. And I won on a DQ, by the way. So that was exciting. So it's a fun tournament. I love that tournament. It's different. One of the things I will say is I've heard people kind of talk about, well, someone mentioned it to me, like, what's the difference between the frustration of being able to make one bet and win other live money tournaments, but you can't make one bet and win this one. You can make one bet and win this one. Well, this one's different. It's a lower denomination. It's a $400, $500, $300. It changes from tournament buy-in, and there's 0 entry fee. So you're not paying an entry fee. You're just, you buy in for $400 and you're betting with your $400. So I think there's some different circumstances about Hawthorne. I love their tournament. I think they do a great job. All the people on the staff there are super nice, and they're always really helpful. And it always seems like people have a good time at that tournament. So I enjoy going there whenever I have the opportunity.
I do love in covering tournaments that there are so many different formats. Now, it gets a little different when you talk about what the format should be of, say, like a championship level event than an event at your local racetrack. And what Hawthorne, to me, does that's so smart with these contests is the prize pool is all added. The players aren't paying for the prize pool. So they're basically almost running it as a benefit for players from what, if I'm not mischaracterizing, correct me if I'm wrong, JK, but since it's all added, the idea is it's just giving you a reason to go and bet what you're going to bet that day through the context of this open board Hawthorne tournament. So it's like instead of a rebate that day for playing with your ADW, your rebate is essentially the chance to win one of the prizes in the tournament. Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, and the bottom line is that in a tournament, let's just say the BCBC, because the math just works for that. It's a $10,000 live bankroll tournament where $7,500 you bet with and $2,500 goes in the prize pool. If someone hits one bet and takes a lot of that money out of the prize pool, it's unfortunate for the other players. In this situation at Hawthorne, if someone hits for $20,000 in one bet, you didn't lose anything. You didn't lose your entry fee. You might have wasted your time. I wasted $80 on Ubers back and forth. But that was it. But you know what I mean?
Spoilers. No spoilers. We're going to tell the story later.
You're not losing your entry fee or you know what I mean? It's not one bet is taking away your opportunity for.
Well, it's also you have to look at the top heaviness of the prize pool. And to be fair, I don't know what it was at Hawthorne, but I'm imagining anytime you're looking at the flat prize pool that we're used to seeing at Keeneland, for example, where the difference between first and seventh, it's not nothing, but it's like $20,000. Now compare that to a tournament where the difference between first and even second is hundreds of thousands of dollars. It creates a very different dynamic. And it's something that, I feel like for the average player, you're better off playing in a contest environment with a flatter prize structure. I'll shift into DRF salesman mode here just for a second. It's one of the things I'm excited about the World Championship of Handicapping. It's still going to be a significant award to win. But when you get in a situation where the winner gets this outsized amount, I feel like it's much harder for the average player to really get their money in good. Now, granted, in our tournament, you've also got the fact that there's no takeout, which helps. But even if you want to go through the qualifying process and pay the takeout associated with that, I still feel like you can get your money in pretty good in terms of not only the action, but the fact that if you finish in the top 5%, you're still going to get a pretty significant reward. That's not always the case in some of these live money tournaments, but how flat is the price structure at Hawthorne for what you I don't know how closely you studied it.
Yeah, I think top 5 got NHC spots, but they also do a pretty good job of like supplementing their prize pool with additional stuff too. Like the reason that I went is because in the spring I got third. I didn't get anything. I didn't get an NHC spot, but I got a free entry into the November tournament. And so that was really cool. And another thing, Pete, that I don't know if you know yet, but I'd love to plug it for these guys, is they're doing a tournament December 29th and 30th. It's the last chance, obviously, for an NHC entry, but they're doing a $1 million bonus deal where they pay for the insurance, where if you win Hawthorne and you win the NHC, you get $1 million bonus. So that's always pretty cool, too. And like I said, I love their tournament. It's easy to get to. It's in Chicago. So whether you live in New York, you live in L.A., or you live in Kentucky, it's a huge hub. So you can usually get there in one flight. So anyways, I thought that was cool that they did that.
Yeah, these $1 million bonuses are interesting. It's worth segueing a little bit to, I don't know if you caught the piece I wrote, just sort of about the ongoing inquiry in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. I just wanted to touch on a few points I'd heard people chatter about, and you and I haven't even talked about all these things. So this is absolutely a good discussion for the show. And one of them was the idea that I'd heard put forth by more than one person that the $1 million bonus maybe provided an incentive for players to engage in practices that weren't exactly in line with the spirit or letter of the rules at the BCBC, but then taking that idea further and being like, the $1 million bonus is the problem. It's too much money. I have a strong view on this, but I'll let you start, JK.
I mean, I can't see the argument for it being too much money. I mean, it's anything that's going to draw attention to our sport, draw participation, and whatnot, I think is important. So I would never say it's what's wrong. It's kind of the phrase you always say is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's like, exactly. I get it. There needs to be some things that need to be tightened up to prevent those things from happening. And I'm confident in how serious the Breeders' Cup is taking this, that those things will get corrected and get rectified to keep this as one of our quality events throughout the year, premier events throughout the year. So, I don't think that I'm not saying that you're wrong, that there's not a motivation.
Oh, that wasn't me saying that. That was something I was reacting to.
Yeah, maybe there's a
I said exactly what you said.
Yeah, maybe there was a motivation that was added, but I don't think that we need to let's get rid of the $1 million bonuses.
Correct. At the same time, I would, if it were my job to audit the tournament, I would look at the $1 million people, just because. I mean, because that logic, there is logic to the idea that having that money available it will give motivation to, I don't want to say, I'm trying to choose my words very carefully here, but I'm just going to leave it at this. It will give motivation for a person raised in a capitalist society to look at every angle. Okay. So I get it. And I do think that in terms of the auditing, that's something to look at. However, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a problem with a contest that was clearly not run with the rigor that and attention to the printed rules that needed to be. And I don't want to beat the Breeders' Cup up on this. They've obviously recognized that there was a problem there by how seriously they're taking this, and kudos to them for doing it. Hopefully they will acquit themselves well when it comes to their decision on what happens with the 2017 tournament and going forward. Like we've said
before, Biggie, Mason, Diddy said it best: "More money, more problems." I talked to a friend of ours, and I won't name him just because I don't know if he wants to be, but talked to a friend of ours that used to be heavily involved in the poker scene. And he told me a bunch of stories about how the poker game got funny when there was more money involved. The more money, the more publicity, the more TV, the more everything is when you started seeing more funny business. I'm not a big poker guy. I've played before, but essentially he pointed out a rule change that had to be had where in all-in hands you couldn't muck. You couldn't muck your cards in an all-in hand, or the hand would be, or something, because essentially guys were dumping chips to each other, and so you had to. They started changing.
I know exactly what you mean, but you got to explain that better for the people who aren't well versed.
You have to explain it because I don't.
So the idea is you'd have to show what your cards were. You couldn't just let the other person win and not have, and where you theoretically, if I'm understanding it correctly, where you theoretically were holding better cards, but according to your collusive strategy, the other guy had more. You were trying to basically give your chips to the other person, and by forcing the reveal of the cards, it made sure that you couldn't sort of essentially collude, to use one of the big word of the day, and just give your chips to somebody else.
Exactly. And so he pointed out that became necessary as the boom was happening. And so, and they adjusted it. They fixed it. Now you have to, I guess in an all-in hand, you have to flip your cards over. You can't you can't do the dramatic wait until the end, here's what I have deal. You have to flip your cards over in an all-in hand. So, I think little changes like that, we'll get it fixed. And so, but yeah, I agree with you that more money, more problems, but it's not like, let's get rid of the money so we don't have the problems.
Exactly.
I think we should make the problems go away by tightening up the ship a little bit.
That's great. Very well put. And I've had multiple people suggest me all these things about make the buy-in this, make the prize pool this. I don't think that's right. I'm willing to look at the ratio between bankroll and prize money. There might be something in that. But just neutering the contest to make it where it's supposedly not worth cheating, that's just going at this incredibly wrong. I will say this, and we haven't talked about it at all. I do think they need to take a long look at going single entry. I think having, in the wake of this scandal, allowing those multiple entries is not something that's going to be friendly to give the average horse player a chance to compete on level footing. I think if you wanted to do multiple entries, in a sense, the way to do it once again would be the poker model of allowing a rebuy. While you could still make your maximum wagers, the first half of the card on Friday, if you bust out, you have the opportunity to buy in again. I think that's the kind of thing that would promote churn and not make it so that I feel like the average horse player right now, in the wake of the scandal, if they were to just run the same rules, the same deal again next year, it would be asking the average player to participate would be like saying, hey, here's a knife, go get involved in that gunfight. And I think one thing they need to look at going forward is rules to change that dynamic. What do you think about the multiple entries in this format, Jonathan?
I think that the people that go to the table to talk about the rule changes are going to have to realize that the Breeders' Cup, and fairly so, have one goal in mind. And, well, at least that was the original goal, and it should come back to being the original goal, which is how can this contest increase churn?
So I think that goes out the window right now. You're in crisis mode if you're the Breeders' Cup. That should have been the goal. The rules should have promoted that all along. But now you're at a point where your contest looks like a benefit for a small group of advantage players. And goal number one has to be, how do we make this so it's not a benefit for a small group of advantage players? Sorry to interrupt, but I did have to.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I just think that it's going to be a hard thing when you're talking to the executives about, hey, we need to get rid of 2 entries. I don't disagree. I like your idea about the possibilities for rebuys, and that can be sold in a way that, look, this is how we'll replace it. It'll clean up the image of the situation. They've done that. They had single entries in the past. I mean, double entries are only 2 years old.
Correct. Even as far back as like 15, I think it was single.
Yeah, 15, it was single entries.
And it's grown since, but I don't know. I think that they obviously, with what happened this year, need to take a different mindset of, it's not about how do we grow the tournament next year. It's about how we save this tournament and start it growing in a healthy way, as opposed to maybe the unhealthy growth of the last 2 years since they allowed the multiple entries. What do you think about the being allowed to win an entry and transfer it? I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem going forward. I mean, hey, if you set up it's not necessarily out of the question if you had a real auditing process to make sure, and you, in your rules, allow yourself the opportunity to disqualify people for anything that, people are always like, how do you prove it? How do you prove it? Well, you know what? To do it right, you probably shouldn't have to prove it. You should have to have ample evidence for the auditor to make a difficult decision and DQ somebody. And if you're going to give somebody that power and you're going to look at the plays in the same way that people looking for corruption on Wall Street are looking at trades, I think if you have that in place, you could potentially allow the transfer of entries if you're really looking at it. Well, I think if like you said, I mean, there's so many little parameters that could be set up. I think transferred entries, $1 million entries, these are all entries that should be scrutinized a little bit harder in the audit process. I mean, how hard is it on the back end to put an asterisk next to a transferred entry and who it was transferred from? Yeah. I mean, it's easier to eliminate by when you know that. When you know that John Smith won an entry and transferred it to Jimmy McWilliams, well, on audit day, those show up as highlighted, where those are 2 that you need to make sure you take a look at. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can just kind of tighten up the process to make it a little bit more of an issue. But like I said, though, we talked about it privately, Pete, is that the problem with the transferred and not allowing people to transfer entries from a Breeders' Cup standpoint is not being able to transfer entries slows down participation in events that they're giving Breeders' Cup spots. Yeah. And they don't have the lure that the NHC Tour does, where you can, there's other opportunities to make money by continuing to play, although you're not gaining additional seats for their main event. So that's going to be another thing that they're going to be hesitant about is eliminating participation throughout the year when it comes to, you know what I mean? Because if I get what you're saying, but it might be, not getting that money in the short term might be the price you pay to run a clean tournament, or the closest thing that can be achieved in the real world to the platonic idea of a clean tournament. And I'd be okay with that. I mean, the Breeders' Cup was designed in the first place to highlight the things that are the best about our sport, not to be a money grab. But here's the thing, and I'll say this before we transition away, because I know we weren't anticipating talking about it this long. Oh, it's funny we went on this tangent, but we've gotten into some new territory, so hopefully the listeners are sticking with us. In my opinion, if you eliminate single entry, if you eliminate double entries, you eliminate the transfer of entries,
you still are going to have the advantage guys who find their cousin that lives in so-and-so who doesn't do blah. The problem is like not the surface. It's the underneath. If you don't fix the foundation of the tournament with the auditing process, then people will always find a way for funny business, whether you allow 2 entries, 3 entries, 12 entries, transfer entries, 6 entries, mom's entries, dog's entries. You have to audit it. You know
Bugs
what I mean?
the handicapping Labrador did want to play this year, but I
tried to get him in. I tried to get him in, or her in, excuse me, and they caught me.
You were the one person who got the yellow flag thrown at this year's Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge.
Well, they had that rule. They added late that I don't know if you saw it. A handicapper cannot collude with a handicapping animal, and so that's what slowed me down. But I was going to load up on Muggs's ticket.
She heard me. She actually was upstairs, and she has come down now to the bunker. Good girl. Good girl.
What if Muggs was live for the $1 million bonus, and then I just loaded up on hers, and then it'd be just weird. The check would be made out to Muggs, the handicap, and then we try to cash it.
Even have a bank account. We got all kinds of problems. All right, let's move on and talk about some racing, JK. Lots of good stuff this weekend. Let's start at Churchill Downs on Saturday, and we're going to loop back to the story you were telling before. You were sitting 4 of 4, I believe, in the pick 5. No, 3 of 3 in the pick 5 with great prices coming in. And then the gates broke for the Kentucky Jockey Club, and you take it from there.
Well, yes, I'm watching it on my phone. And I think Travis Stone made a tweet about this before where he said, when you're watching racing, when is your video most likely to freeze? Right when they pop, when they turn for home, at the 16th pole, or at the wire. And I swear, it's like I almost think that there's science to it. I feel like it's like so many people log in at once to watch the race, then the video actually does slow down.
It definitely slows down around the races. I can guarantee you that. It's never, you're listening to, it's never you're listening to Andy break down the race and it freezes. It's not, Maggie going over what she sees in the paddock. But it is a good question. I don't know if it's more likely when they break or when they turn for home. Those would be my two votes, though.
So I singled Tiz Mischief as a single A horse, and then I used like 5 B horses, and I'm embarrassed, but for whatever reason, I did not use Enticed. So
gotta give us a little more for whatever reason. I mean, that makes it sound like it was an oversight. You must have not liked something, the maiden win in the slop. Figured you might be overbet off the flashy, it's tricky Medaglia d'Oro pedigree. You had to have a logic that needs to be explained here.
Okay. So I'll come back to. I'll get to the story. It'll make more sense once you understand why. I was.
Apologize.
No. You're right. I'm going your route first. I thought that the maiden race was in the slot. That was one. I thought the horse was going. The figure wasn't that high, and I just liked so many other horses in the race that I felt like I was really gaining an edge by tossing, because my bet of the day was Tiz Mischief. I wanted to single Tiz Mischief. And then I used all these other kind of likely price horses. I thought Entice was going to be bet. I was guilty of being too cute.
That's a real problem we face as horse players.
Yeah, I was guilty of being too cute. So anyways, they turn for home. Enticed dips down inside. Tiz Mischief dipped down inside. Entice goes like 4 or 5 wide. So at this point, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a better trip here. I got a good shot. I got my horse that I want versus the horse that I've tossed. And then they get to like a 3 across the track situation. And I'm saying, oh my God, come on with this 12 horse. Come on with this 12 horse. Because I'm sitting on a 5-figure score and a definite win in the tournament if I can pull this thing off. And my video freezes. Right when they're head to head. When I thought, whatever. And then what happens to all horse players, to see if this happened to you or anyone else. Of course, what happens, my freaking phone rings because everyone knows I'm live, and I'm hoping the video is going to pick back up and I just got a 10-second break and then I can actually feel the emotion of what happened. And my phone rings and I'm like, oh, what am I? So I answer it and I was like, did I win? And my buddy Ryan Flanders actually goes, no, buddy, you didn't win.
That's a good Ryan Flanders impression. That's very much his deadpan delivery.
So I probably said a profanity and I hung up the phone. And he wasn't upset. He knew I wasn't hanging up on him. And then he texted me inquiry, exclamation point.
Yeah, because
And
the
I was like,
horse that the horse that dropped the rider early. I never
know.
thought that inquiry gave you any chance.
But for a second, I thought Arlington Magic, Hawthorne Tournament, pick 5 Magic. I'm gonna get put up again. I'm gonna get put up.
My God, you're
and
so
then I didn't
delusional.
see the finish, the last 16, so I didn't know if there was interference or not. I mean,
Right, you thought maybe it was a lean all over in the stretch thing because where your video froze, it looked like it could have gone that way.
Yeah, long story short, I got beat. Oh, and to make it even more anticlimactic, I got beat in the next leg too, so it didn't matter anyways. although it paid 4 or 5 the way it was.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have paid 4 or 5 with.
Why wouldn't it have?
Oh no, you're right. It would have because
I was longer
price than Enticed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you might have been okay. Did you have it more than once though?
Yeah, I had it for. No, yes, I did. I had it. I was on a $1.50 ticket at that point.
So yeah, I mean maybe $12,000 or something. You could have got out of that.
And to be honest, I was alive to a 9-2 horse in the last for 4 out of 5.
Oh, interesting.
But then that 9 horse won. So, anyways.
Pretty funny. All right. Well, Enticed was the winner. 106 on time form in a race that didn't get any particular coding. 81 on the Beyer scale. Tiz Mischief ends up running second. Very similar figures. I didn't think the trips were particularly easy for either horse. Enticed had kind of a wonky beginning. But Tiz Mischief, even though I agree with what you said, JK, that he got in position turning for home, up until then I wasn't thrilled with the trip. Just didn't really get position early. Sort of between horses. And I also thought in a race where the pace held together, for the most part, I thought it was impressive that Tiz Mischief was coming from farther back. I really thought you ran very well there.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, they both. The bad part about it is that, in my opinion, Tiz Mischief still got a better trip just off the turn when Tiz Mischief dipped down inside and saved all that ground, and Tice was hung 4 wide. So.
I'm surprised you say that just because of the just like the relative positions early. For me, I would, in a dirt race, I give more credit to, this is just an interesting maybe philosophical point to get into. Like I'm more concerned about the early position in a dirt race, especially when, the 1 and 3 finishers early were the 1 and 3 finishers late, and the 2 horse was some rag, and your horse came from far back. Like I give extra credit to that as opposed to looking at of what happened before the pace call in a dirt race, as opposed to like the way you're describing where he was basically at the pace call. I look at that more in turf races. Am I doing it wrong?
No, I don't think you're doing it wrong. It's just I get what you're saying. But Tiz Mischief didn't really get stopped. It's like on the run that he had when he was asked when he was put down. For whatever reason, if he got, he was kind of stopped or had to shuffle or whatever, I mean, he kind of got free run to me and then dipped down to the inside and he had every excuse. I mean, I'm sorry, he had no excuse. He had every reason to beat Enticed, and he really didn't. And Enticed kind of got bumped pretty hard going into the first turn, which I think is extremely significant for 2-year-olds that are, trying to go long for the first time. I mean, he took a nice little shot right before that trouble happened where the 2 dropped the rider.
I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I think Enticed also definitely had his trouble. I was giving Tiz Mischief a little bit of extra credit, maybe, given how tight the margin was. Let's look just for fun at some future prices. Some books in Las Vegas with their new numbers have Enticed as a 20-1 shot for the Derby and Tiz Mischief at 30-1. Looking at odds checker, Enticed available as long as 25. And Tiz Mischief as long as 33-1. Neither of those prices get my blood pumping. What do you think?
I think if you're betting a winner of a stake on the Derby Trail in a future, you're probably making a mistake. In my opinion, you want to bet a horse. You want to try to find a horse before they run in the stake. Or one that's like off the board in the stake with a real excuse. Because I just feel like it's just too wise guy-ish, and 20-1 on Enticed at this point seems a little bit silly.
Yeah, I'd much rather have the horses at the top of the market at 12-1 that I'm seeing on odds checker, both Doro and Good Magic, both at 12-1. Both of those, like if you made me pick one of those 4, it would come from the Bolt Doro Good Magic group as opposed to the Enticed Tiz Mischief group. Do you agree with that, or would you just stay the heck away from all of it?
Yeah, let's brainstorm. I just had an idea, and if anyone has any other ideas, but let me just throw out this premise for a game we can invite Matt into, where
you just want to get back on the winning ways. Since the Kitchen Slam, man, your form has deteriorated
I'm
mightily.
looking for anything. If you guys want to play tennis or something, you'll probably beat me in tennis. A game, a kind of a fantasy type of game, but your future odds somehow count towards it. I think there's something to that.
All right,
I don't know what it is.
Okay, well, basically, you're talking about something specifically related to the Derby, looking at current odds.
Yeah, looking at current odds. Like, I don't know when the next Churchill future is. That they just closed the future. I guess you could do it with those closing odds. Yeah, you can
always use odds. I'd rather use Odds Checker, I think. But we can figure it out.
And they have that cool stallion bet. Did you look at that at all?
I didn't, but I love the idea of the stallion bet, and we probably should look at that at some point, just for a little bit of fun. But obviously, very early days on this Derby trail, but still fun to have a few data points anyway to talk about it. Shall we move on to the Golden Rod? Or do you have anything else on the Kentucky Jockey Club? No,
we can move around.
Excellent. So this race ended up significantly faster early, and Road to Victory ends up getting the win. 91 on the Beyer scale, a 106 on time form, but with the formula they used to upgrade horses who were close to fast paces early. And it wasn't coded red, but you could just see from the figures that Craig puts in there that it was faster early. That 106 on the time form scale got upgraded to a 112, which brought it right in line with the Beyer figure, I would say. What did you think of this race, JK?
This one was actually cool. This race was being run like as I was taking off, which, like, I was like, come on. I'm sorry. I'm guilty. I did not have my phone in airplane mode. FAA, if you're listening, do not.
Did we get an Alec Baldwin situation with the flight attendant scolding you for,
Yeah. So anyways, I single A'd Monomi girl or Monomoy girl, and I single B'd Road to Victory. So, it worked out. I guess, in hindsight, I think it's always an interesting question when you're in these situations. We've talked about it before. Are you better off having the 4 to 5 shot for $10, or are you better having the 7 to 1 shot for 50 cents or for $1 or $1.50? And I think different circumstances lead to different answers. What's your overall view on that?
Oh, it's a great question, and I think you hit it on the head. It sort of depends what the rest of the bet looks like. I think, in theory, I assume, had Road to Victory 3 times as opposed to 16 times for Road to Victory.
I think I had an $8. I think I had an $8 with the 6 with Monomoy girl, and a $1.50 with the 5.
Somebody better at math could probably just look at that right away and tell you which way you were going to have more equity going forward. But for me, the real question is what's coming up in the sequence in terms of coverage. Sometimes that 4 to 5 shot not only gives you that huge denomination going forward, but also will unlock a leg so that in an open race, instead of having 3 runners, you have 7. So a lot of the times that freedom, if there's open legs coming up and I'm going to be unlocking them, I'll take that over whatever the strict math of it says.
Yeah, right. And then also I think that to keep in mind, like not only the win, the pari-mutuel win price, that's also important in figuring out this equation. But I also think there's something to the fact that Monomoy girl was the most likely single in the entire pick 5 sequence.
And you're saying that as a reason that it was better the other way?
Yes, I think so.
I think so too. I think there is a little bit of bias beyond just the raw math when it comes to, it's everybody's single. That horse probably within the pick, maybe even a try. And somebody would have to look at this, but my gut tells me that sometimes that horse that might be 4 to 5 on the win end could be 5 cents, 10 cents less, maybe not all the way down to 3 to 5, but be essentially a shorter price within the economic environment of the pick. Is that
this quandary tells me is that it was bet right.
Yeah.
Like if we're even having the conversation of which one I would have preferred, then it means I bet it right. Or, at least close enough to right. You know what I mean? Like it's, if you just bet a caveman ticket and you got the 6 and the 5, there's no question who you want.
Yeah. Sometimes right away. Like, that was your big A for the sequence wins, and you're looking at what you bet afterwards, and you're thinking about, well, now, why did I have 30% of my play in backups to horses that weren't this horse? Like, that doesn't make sense. This was my strong opinion. My tickets needed to be 80% or more through this horse, and you'll just feel it right away. So you're right. If you have to think about it, if it's worth making a pro and con argument, you probably did it close enough to right to live with, at least this time.
Yeah, for sure. With all that said, they both ran really well.
Yeah, what did you think? I mean, Monomoy looked legless late, but again, given that it was not coded red, but the pace figures were faster, that it could have just been a function of the pace, or do you think it's the more that maybe she doesn't want to go that far and Road to Victory does? Do you read anything into the late stages of the race?
I thought Monomoy Girl put her away at the top. She kind of spurted away and opened up. Like Road to Victory looked like she was going to run by her. Came to her at like between the quarter pole and the 8th pole. And then Monomoy Girl like kind of opened up by 2, and I thought she was going to put her away. And then like the last 16th, like you said, she got a little leg worry, and then Road to Victory ran by her. It was a very interesting stretch run. I think they're both just nice fillies.
A lot of times when that happens visually, it is because the horse that looked like they'd put them away just doesn't want to go that far. So maybe that's where I'm leaning, especially since it wasn't, if the race had like officially been coded red and the pace figures were just crazy, I think sometimes that lack of stamina can be an optical illusion related to the pace. But in this case, I'm going to go with maybe she just doesn't want to go that far, at least until she proves otherwise. That's how I'm going to solve that riddle for now.
Fair enough.
Shall we move on to the Hollywood Derby?
Shall we?
The Remsen form from 2017 redeemed, JK. Motown, for the longest time, there had been 0 winners to come out of last year's Remsen, a race that this year will be happening next weekend. Now Motown has won twice and showed that freakish-looking allowance win was not, it may have been freakish, but it was not a fluke. Looked really good here. 100 on the Beyer scale, a 122 on time form, getting to the winner's circle for Coolmore and Tony D. What did you think of the effort?
Well, I mean, the rim. I think Takaful has he kind of redeemed the Remsen form a little bit earlier, and then No Dozing. He needs to probably do the same thing Motown did and head over to the grass. I don't think they tried him on the grass before, but
I forgot that Takaful was in that race. I totally spaced on that.
Yeah, they ran. I mean, look, here's the thing. I thought it was interesting when they put Motown on the grass, and our friend Scott Calder suggested that it was kind of an attempt to kind of wake the horse up, try something different. Apparently he had kind of fallen into a funk. He couldn't find his form from the Remsen, and then he ran huge on the grass at Aqueduct or at Belmont, like you mentioned. And now he shows up here and wins a Grade 1. Now he's Grade 2 place as a 2-year-old going 2 turns on the dirt. He's won a Grade 1 as a 3-year-old on the turf. I would imagine now we're going to try to find a way to get him a Grade 1 on the dirt for an operation that's looking to create stallions.
Yes,
that's what they want to do.
We were
and
talking
if they can
about
get
this.
a son of one of their best stallions, Uncle Mo, that is a dual Grade 1 winner on 2 different surfaces, going 2 turns, and a Grade 2 winner going 1 mile and 1/8, it feels like you're sitting on something.
I get it. And this is another one of those issues, and we talked about this extensively when we talked about the whole Mendelssohn U.S. Navy flag issue for the Breeders' Cup, where to a lot of horse players, the way those horses were spotted made no sense, and to a breeder or somebody who understands the breeding business, it made perfect sense. Exact same thing here for me. As a horse player, I see Motown, a horse who looked like he was gone at the game, getting on turf, immediately looking like, okay, this is where you should be, backing that up with a Grade 1 victory, confirming that's where you should be. The idea of going back to dirt, as a horse player, I don't get it. I don't like it. I would bet against it. As somebody looking to make a stallion, you're absolutely right. You've got to try. Because what if it was more a question of, okay, he was sour then, he's woken up now. The upside value in making the bet that he could be placed even in a graded stake, let alone win on dirt, I guess it's got to be worth the chance. And then if it doesn't work out, you can always go right back to the turf. As a horse player, I will be betting against, however.
For the DRF workout report people who have a weird memory like mine, before the race at Saratoga, August 5th, when Neolithic beat him, that horse was getting A- workouts at Saratoga.
Neolithic
the horse
or
can
Motown?
Run on dirt.
Which horse was getting the A-?
Motown was. Yeah. The horse can run on dirt. And my whole thing is like, is a guy who's never owned a horse, the way that I would campaign this horse is you keep him happy on the turf and you pick your dirt spots. A race like the Stephen Foster that always doesn't come up the craziest tough. I mean, obviously Gun Runner was in it last year, but sometimes it could be a little bit of a sneaky grade one. Maybe try to catch the Woodward next summer, and try to catch him there because the Woodward is usually easier than the Whitney. Maybe point for try to sneak in the Cigar Mile next year. Obviously, the Cigar Mile is coming up too quick for him this year. That race can sometimes come up a little bit of it's not this year. It doesn't look like it's going to be with Sharp Azteca and some of the other ones. But or why not, try to sneak in a race like the Malibu or something, a restricted race that'll be happening on December 26th, going 7 for a horse who's excelled. Kind of going the one-turn situation, and maybe the cutback will hit him between the eyes. I mean, just pick your spots. I'm not saying you flip him back to a dirt horse. I'm saying you try to find that grade one somewhere along the line for him. If Cupid can win a grade one, then it feels like Motown should be able to sneak one out too. No offense to the beautiful white horse.
I was just going to say, you say all these nice things about Coolmore, and then you throw in a Cupid dig.
Scott texted me one time when I said Cupid was second tier, but I mean, he is second tier for that operation.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's you put your different hats on. Your horse player hat on, absolutely fair statement. If you're talking about breeding and what could make a potential stallion, I can see where the offense comes from. But there you go. There's our that's pretty interesting. I didn't think we'd get that much out of the Hollywood Derby, honestly, when I was just writing down my notes. But I think there's a lot to chew on there, and we'll have to see what happens next. Obviously, wherever he shows up, we'll be talking about it right here on the DRF Players Podcast. Shall we move on to Sunday then?
We shall.
And really, the story, I guess, of Sunday in a way. And we'll why don't we start off by. We can start off by talking about the DeMiller. We can start off by talking just more generally about the whole idea of East versus West. And at this point, doesn't it almost feel like these East Coast turf horses heading out there, it's like the major leaguer going down to bait up on AAA pitching for a little bit?
But why is the question, right? Like, I want to know, like, what is it, a scientific reason? Is it a ground reason? Is it an air reason? Is it what? I mean, I guess it could be really simple.
I think it's the most simple reason that there is. The better turf horses are East.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what it is. I mean,
and it's not the better horses overall. I mean, we see West Coast horses obviously come and win every stake on Belmont Day. It's not. I'm not trying to impugn the West Coast like overall as a horse population. But it seems like in this division, this probably isn't right, but it's almost like the gap between East and West, at least based on the events of this weekend, the gap between East and West was looking bigger than the gap between England and Ireland and the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what it is like on the West Coast, speed is very prominent. It's very prominent. This is a little ironic considering Analyze it won on the front end, but speed is very prominent, and so a lot of their horses are trained that way. The trainers their tendencies tend to lean that way. And on the East Coast, it's more of a stamina, sit, finish type, typically. And so I'm assuming that maybe that just has something to do with it. And there's an abundance of turf racing that happens on the East Coast. Belmont, Saratoga, Aqueduct they have 2 turf courses. Gulfstream, 3 turf courses. So there's a lot more turf racing happening on the East Coast. And so maybe that has a lot to do with it. But it's pretty clear. I think on Saturday the East Coast horses were 1-2 in the late stakes races. And then obviously what happened on Sunday was another point of East Coast kind of proving their dominance when it comes to the turf racing.
I like your clever ideas of some of the other factors that might go into it. That's been the case for a long time now, and the dominance we're seeing seems to be relative. Well, yeah, it's relatively new. I mean, certainly to this extent, and I mean, how much of it can just be attributed to the unbelievable operation that is Chad Brown? And why don't we talk a little bit specifically? I mean, analyze that this was the point of entry that we talked about, I think, a little bit on the show, based on the impressive first race, to come out there to run a 93 Beyer speed figure as a 2-year-old. Craig's Timeform US number backs that up with a 1:15, doing it with tactical speed and finish. Just really, really looking like a super serious horse in the process. I mean, I don't know. I don't have too much to say other than, wow, that was awesome. I hope he trains on. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was remarkable. I think it's exciting from a standpoint of really loving his sire, Point of Entry, who I believe is one of two sons of Dynaformer that are studs right now, that are stallions, which should be him and Point of Entry and Temple City, right?
Yeah, Temple City's also a Dynaformer. I didn't realize they were the only two, but that's interesting. Well,
I think they're the two that there might be other ones. I think that those are the two main ones, though, for sure, at least at this point. I thought he was really good. I mean, our friend Candace Hare tweeted the other day. I thought it was really funny. I don't know if you saw it, but she said, and I don't, excuse me for misquoting, but something along the lines that apparently Secretariat has been reincarnated and his name is analyzed.
I assume she was making fun of the hype that people like us have been putting forth about this horse.
And look, I missed the race live. I was probably I don't remember where I was, but I was probably on an airplane. When I watched it, I had heard best ever. I watched it and I was like, that was good. It wasn't breathtaking. It was just really, really, really good.
And fast.
It was but it wasn't. Yeah, but it wasn't it didn't make me fall over in my seat. I remember when Sydney's Candy ran into La Jolla, and I mean, he wasn't running against anything, and I don't think his figure was nearly as fast, but just kind of blew him away, And that's what I was expecting to see when I saw it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from the horse. It was brilliant, but I guess I was expecting a little bit better when I heard the hype before I saw it.
What's that? There's a mathematical formula for. Hype minus reality equals what you actually thought. Or I think I got the equation wrong, but it clearly plays in. What you've heard about something before you see it clearly does factor in, especially when it's in the social media era, where as Candace's brilliant tweet demonstrates, people can get pretty excited. They can color the way you look at an event. At any rate, clearly a horse to keep our eyes on going forward.
Well, now I got a question.
Hit me.
At what point do you try him on the dirt as the most brilliant 2-year-old allegedly we've seen that everyone's so excited about? At what point do you take that chance of, can this turn into a Derby horse?
I mean, maybe never if you're Chad Brown. I mean, he's not somebody who feels the need to force square pegs into round holes. That said, if he sees something in the horse that suggests he might take to dirt, but I would think he's the kind of guy who would be more likely to have a frank conversation with an owner. If he didn't, I don't think he's going to do it unless he thinks it's got a real chance to work. I think Chad's body of work.
It's interesting. Since August 6th, the horse only worked on the turf twice. And maybe that's why the horse doesn't like the dirt. Maybe he doesn't move well on the dirt. Maybe that's why the horse went off at 13-1 on debut, because no one thought much of him. And those two turf works were back at Saratoga in September, and they just kind of missed him. I don't know. I mean, it's a Dynaformer, and obviously it's a Dynaformer family. Dynaformer can obviously get you there. But I don't know. I think
what's the bottom of the pedigree if you're looking at it? I don't remember.
It's a consolidator mare.
Yeah, I got to look a little more specifically at the family. I would trust Chad to do the right thing by the horse and not just sort of by rote say, okay, we have a really hypey 2-year-old, we have to run on turn. I don't think some trainers would be in a position where their owners could almost force them to do that. I don't see that happening to him at this point in his career. And that's a good thing for everybody involved. I think if he does it, he'll do it for the right reason because he thinks it might work and not because of, oh, well, we kind of have to. No, you don't kind of have to if you don't think it's going to work and it's not in the best interest of your horse, you know?
God, can I just go back and get 13-1 on this horse on debut?
Hey, I'm not going to red board it, man. I'm not going to red board it. Let's talk about the matriarch. I want to get that in before we get out of here. We have one question I want to get to, and I want to look ahead quickly to very quickly to the Cigar Mile. So we got a lot to do in about 3 minutes, JK. Off Limits gets the job done. 4 in a row. Chad once again. Marty Schwartz, 101 buyer, 123 on time for him without any special coding. Anything to add on the matriarch, or is just the fact that we mentioned that it happened good enough?
This is the tale of two rides. I mean, I remember I had Off Limits at Belmont on the 28th, and I had to text the friends and groups. That was a little bit too cute for me by Joel. The I'm not really going to ask. I'm going to wait and look really flashy move. And then he rides this brilliant ride where he takes back. He saves all the ground. He goes inside, and he finishes. I don't think he even had to hit her with the stick, which is something I've noticed from Joel. He doesn't even do very often, which I think is pretty cool. She was good. It was Chad. I guess I found my eyes on Rubelinda just because I've fanboyed a little bit on her. Maybe she's going to end up being more of a sprinter. Maybe that was a little bit too far for her. Still, I thought she ran well enough. Cambodia ran well. It's a good group, but Off Limits is on a bit of a streak right now. What is that? That was 4 in a row for her. And she'll continue to move forward for Chad and for Marty Schwartz and try to maybe pick up some of the pieces that Lady Eli left behind.
Great note here from Matt Bernier, who's coming up next on many of these same stations. Matt Bernier Show, keep it tuned here. Mentions that Came Home is on the bottom of the pedigree for Analyze It, a horse I remember very well. Paco Gonzalez, multiple grade 1 dirt winner, including the Pacific Classic, unless my memory's failing me, but I think I have that one right. So that would tilt me towards making the experiment. But again, Chad is going to do what he believes is right for the horse. He's shown that time and time again. So we'll stay tuned for that one. Quick question here from POTUS Capper. Can you ask at UT Big Hair if he's still crushing ice cream?
But actually, to be honest with you, man, it's making me wonder who that is because I have pledged to a no ice cream for 21 days starting today. And I don't know who I've told that to, but man,
we might have a clue to the identity of POTUS Capper. We've chased down several incorrect threads so far, or either that or we've been BS brilliantly. But we'll have to see. You work on that. So 21 days no ice cream for you?
Yeah, starting today. I've got to reel it in. It's getting a little bit out of control. So no ice cream for 21 days, and that's starting today is day 1. So I crushed ice cream last night.
The PTF Sportsbook has put up a price 4 to 5. You'll never make it. Feel free to contact if you want to get involved on that wager.
And then contact me if you can get Pete to take the bet and you want to collude. We can collude together and try to take advantage of old Pete.
JK, I expect better from you. Just another advantage player looking to stick it to the little guy. This at UT Big Hair. Quick price look ahead for the Cigar Mile, and then we are out of here. Sharp as Tekka 6 to 5. Practical Joke 7 to 2. Mind Your Biscuits 5. That's the bottom of the market. Any of those do anything for you?
One of those horses will not lose. I am ready for a Fu Manchu bet.
Which one will not lose?
Yeah, well, you have to tune in on Friday, Pete.
All right, I like it. We can talk about it off air. That's all the time we have. We got Matt Bernier coming up next. I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. We will be back on Friday. We'll also be back Thursday night with Mike Beer. Look for it on DRF.com. Going to be doing a webinar for the Cigar Mile Day Stakes. Please tune in then. May you win all your photos.